Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 patch 2.6 Necromancer build guide. This is my update to the video we did on the BONESTORM build. It went from beta to live servers with no changes. The build still lives, I still love it, it's still super fun. Now, senior developer Travis Day did come by our stream and mention that there will be a slight nerf incoming to this build. Currently, it is the most powerful build for the Necromancer. It's cleared as high as a Greater Rift 107 solo, with all indications pointing to it being able to climb even higher. We're hoping the nerf bat won't hit it too hard though, we still want this to remain viable, so we're going to go over in this video all the skills and the gear and the stats on the gear that you want to rock this build. Now, in case you haven't seen my previous video on the BONESTORM build, we'll do a quick recap of how this build works, but the greater focus of this video will be letting you know what exactly you want, what stats on every piece of gear. So the BONESTORM build is a Grace of Inarius build. Relevant set bonuses include the 4-piece, in which bone armor grants you more damage reduction, and the 6-piece, which creates the Bonado, the BONESTORM, that swirls around you and increases any damage originating from you. We want to keep this Bonado up at all times, ideally on full stacks. So let's start by taking a quick look at the skills. Our generator will be Grim Scythe, Cursed Scythe. We want to be applying curses, and we'll explain why when we get to our itemization. Of course, we need bone armor. We go with a dislocation rune because it is the most useful rune that will combine well with our items in order to deal more damage. We're going to deal more damage to stun targets. This is far more useful than the rune that increases the straight up damage of bone armor. Next, we want Corpse Lance, Brittle Touch. Corpse Lance is a really strong skill that does a lot of damage, and the Brittle Touch rune is basically self-buffing. You hit the enemy, and by hitting it, you're going to deal more damage to it on every consecutive attack. Next, we want Blood Rush Potency. Blood Rush is a really useful mobility power for the Necromancer. It's not just used for moving quickly, it's used for getting out of tight situations, getting to where you need to be. It's a lifesaver. And the Potency rune doubles your armor. This gives you a nice defensive buff and will let you climb up those Greater Rift levels. Next, we want Land of the Dead Frozen Lands. Land of the Dead is on a 120-second cooldown. That's a long time. However, its power is really strong. All corpse skills can be used at will for 10 seconds. That means 10 seconds of unlimited spamming of Corpse Lands. The Frozen Lands rune is really strong. That freeze effect is very powerful, lasts an eternity, and will both save your life and ramp up a lot of damage because we are gearing to do more damage versus control impaired enemies. Then lastly, we'll take Decrepify, Dizzying Curse. There is some discussion in the community over what the optimal rune here is. We do have to take Decrepify though, at least for now. This is a huge toughness skill when combined with an item. A change may be made to that item to be able to let it work with any curse, but we're not there yet, so for now we do need Decrepify. Dizzying Curse gives Decrepify a chance to stun, and again, we want these stuns for this build. Now, an alternative is actually Borrowed Time. This gives you up to 20% cooldown reduction, 1 per enemy affected by the curse. This will allow you to use a lot of your other skills more often. 20% off Land of the Dead is pretty significant, and 20% off Bone Armor Dislocation allows you to get that stun effect more often. Some people are staunchly advocating that Borrowed Time is the superior choice, but the highest clears on the leaderboard so far are with Dizzying Curse. So if you want to, try both out and compare for yourself. Onto our passives, we want Stand Alone. This is not a pet build, so this has given us a big armor buff. We want Spreading Malediction, 1% damage bonus for each enemy afflicted by one of your curses. It's because of this that we really want to be spamming Decrepify all over the place. And this is our only essence spender, so we're really not going to have any shortage of essence. You want to make sure every enemy on screen is affected by a curse. Next, we want Blood is Power. This is basically cooldown reduction that kicks in when you're in a tight spot. This will help you get your Blood Rush, for instance, off cooldown faster as you're taking damage to zip out of there before you die. And of course, it's going to help a lot with Land of the Dead. Then lastly, we're taking Final Service. It's the free life, the extra life. Now, in my previous guide, I said to take Overwhelming Essence instead. This increases our essence, which will explain why it's important to have more essence, but will also explain why we don't need to take this passive. So onto the gear that you need. You need the full 6 pieces of the Inarius set. This build will not work if you do not have the full 6-piece bonus. You could get by with the Ring of Royal Grandeur, but you really will want those extra items, those extra rings that we're going to cover. For your belt, you want Dainty's Binding. You don't absolutely need it, but it's really going to help you climb those greater rifts. This gives you damage reduction anytime you have someone under the effect of Decrepify, so all the time. This effectively doubles our toughness. For your wrist slot, there's not a super great choice for the Necromancer here, but Ancient Parthian Defenders will be your best in slot. They give you some extra damage reduction when you're stunning enemies, and again, we're focusing on stuns. If you're playing solo, you'll want a Unity, one on yourself, one on your follower, and the token that renders your follower invulnerable. This, again, doubles your toughness. For your other ring, you'll want a Crispin's Sentence. This makes you deal double damage to slowed enemies, and 4 times damage to enemies that have some other control impair effect that is not a slow, i.e. a stun. If you're playing multiplayer, then you don't want to go with the Unity setup. You'll want to ideally wear a Crispin's and have cubed the Wisdom of Kalan. That gives you 5 more stacks on your bone armor, which, when factoring in the Inarius 4-piece bonus, translates into an additional 25% damage reduction. This takes you from 50% damage reduction up to 75% damage reduction, which makes it equivalent to the effects of a Unity. And the only reason in solo that you don't want to go with wearing the Crispin's and cubing the Wisdom of Kalan is because it's difficult to get a perfectly rolled Crispin's. For your cubed weapon, you want Tragul's Corroded Fang. This lets your Cursed Scythe skill always apply a curse and let you deal triple damage to cursed enemies. And lastly, for the armor slot, previously we were using an Aquila Cuirass to gain an additional huge damage reduction buff. Now we're going a little bit more, I don't know if we can really say glass cannon, but we're going for damage over survivability with some Corpse Whisper Pauldrons. Every time you consume a corpse, Corpse Lance will deal 30% more damage, stacking up to 20 times. That becomes very significant. This really helps take down the big targets when you have Line of the Dead active and you have no shortage of corpses. So that covers the gearing. We'll now take a look at every piece of gear and what stats you ideally want. Now, I'm not fully geared yet, so don't go by what you see, go by what I say. And I'll also have, for quick reference, a link to a D3 planner guide in the description below. So for your shoulders, you ideally want Intelligence, Vitality, Cooldown Reduction, and Corpse Lance damage. For your helm, you want Intelligence, Vitality, Crit Chance. For your amulet, Traveler's Pledge, we didn't mention this, but Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose combo is what you want. Damage and toughness together. So for the amulet, cold damage, crit chance, crit damage ideally. For your chest, you want Intelligence, Vitality, and Corpse Lance damage. Of course, wherever you can, try to squeeze in a secondary resist. For your gloves, you ideally want Intelligence, crit chance, crit damage, and then either attack speed or cooldown reduction. For your bracers, cold damage, Intelligence, Vitality, crit chance. For your belt, Intelligence, Vitality, Life, and Armor. For your pants, Intelligence, Vitality, Armor. For your boots, you probably have the most wiggle room here. The 3 key stats are Intelligence, Vitality, and Armor. And then for the last one, you can go with either Move Speed, All Resist, or Life Regen. But if you don't go with All Resist, then you definitely want a secondary resistance. For your Compass Rose, you ideally want Damage, Intelligence, Crit Chance, Crit Damage. And for your Unity, ideally you want Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and increased damage versus elites. As for the weapon, Rylina's Shadow Hook, we didn't cover that before, but every point of max essence increases your damage by 0.5%. This is why we wanted to stack essence. So it's very important as a secondary stat that you get plus max essence. You can get a max of 40 here, which is 20% more damage. When we get to Paragon points, we'll explain why we're actually not going then with the passive that further increases our essence. Ideal stats on the weapon will be 10% damage, intelligence, and then the last stat could be either attack speed or vitality. For the gems in your gear, you absolutely want a diamond in the helm, and then for the body armors, you can go with either topazes for more damage, or if you want more armor, you can go with rubies, or emeralds as well. As for the legendary gems, we want Bane of the Trapped, best gem in the game. You'll always have that damage buff up. And then the other 2 gems will want the Mirene as well as the Pain Enhancer. And the reason for this is our 6-piece bonus. So the Mirene, here I only have a level 86 Mirene, and it does over 8,000 damage per hit, per smite. And this build really revolves around the Mirene and getting it to smite. That 8,000 is being buffed by that almost 3,000 multiplier on the 6-piece set bonus. Outside of Corpse Lance, Mirene is our biggest damage source. Then for the Pain Enhancer, critical hits cause the enemy to bleed for a bunch of damage as physical over 3 seconds. Again, this is buffed, but that damage is nowhere as significant as Mirene's. However, what is cool and helps us quite a bit is the Blood Frenzy, the attack speed we gain, because more attack speed means we're going to be able to trigger the Smite and the 6-piece bonus more often. And this is actually what will be nerfed with this build. It's how often the Mirene will be triggered by the 6-piece bonus. So the 6-piece bonus creates this vortex, this bonado swirling around you, which does damage ticks every second. Travis Day said that the damage ticks were causing the Mirene to trigger too often, and this will likely be dialed back. I'm really hoping this does not render Mirene unviable for this build, because what I like most about this build is having that Mirene. I like this build because we're using a gem that basically was never used before. We don't need new legendary gems added to Diablo 3, we just need the existing gems to be made relevant. Now onto our Paragon points. You want to get your total move speed up to 25%, that's factoring in any gear you have. Then you want to dump everything into Essence. You really want to have your Essence maxed out here. 50 additional Essence translates into 25% more damage. Well, it's not quite that way, we'll explain why. So by default, the Necromancer has 200 Essence. With Rylena's Shadowhook, this means 100% more damage, so double damage. Now we already have plus 40 Essence on our Rylena's Shadowhook, so we're now up to 240 Essence. This increases our damage bonus from 100 to 120%. So in this case, 40 more Essence literally means 20% more damage. But then what happens when we add another source of Essence? 50 additional Essence brings us up to 290. This is not the same as saying 25% more damage. Yes, it comes out to 25 in that we're now going up to 145% more damage, but the relative increase from 120 to 145 is less than 25%. It's in fact around 20%. So then if we take Overwhelming Essence as a passive, that's another 40 Essence, which you would think, again, well, that's 20% more damage, right? No, because of the way it adds up together. Overwhelming Essence would bring us up to a total of 330 Essence, which overall becomes 165% more damage. But the relative increase is only around 12-13%. Going from 145 to 165, that's only about a 12-13% jump. So damage is damage, and if you want to maximize damage, then by all means, take Overwhelming Essence, but Final Service, the utility of having a free life, if you can spend more time alive, then you're dealing more damage. If you're not dying, then by all means, go with Overwhelming Essence. Alright, back to our Paragon points. You'll dump the rest into Intelligence. For offense, prioritize crit chance and crit damage. Then probably attack speed over cooldown. For defense, life, armor, all resist, life regen, they're conveniently in order for you. And utility doesn't really matter. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you like the BONESTORM build? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.